People always say justice takes time, but sometimes it takes exactly 5 minutes and a single empty seat. When Flight 728 from Singapore to Tokyo began boarding, no one on that plane knew that a 5-year-old girl in a pink jacket was about to test the entire airline's soul. The first-class cabin of Meridian Air smelled faintly of citrus and leather polish, the kind of scent that says, "You're rich enough to breathe different air." Arya Nguyen kicked her tiny shoes against the base of seat 1A, humming softly to herself. A small teddy bear, Benny, sat on her lap with a paper boarding pass tucked beneath its paw. Her guardian, Mai Lin Tran, smiled as she stored a small backpack overhead. "Do you want your apple juice now or after takeoff, sweetheart?" "After," Arya whispered. "Benny wants to watch the airplanes first." The cabin was still half empty when the first crack in the calm appeared. A tall woman in a pearl jacket entered. Vivian Darcy, a frequent flyer whose diamond membership tag sparkled like armor. Right behind her, Cara Solis, the lead flight attendant, followed with the efficient grace of someone who believed rules were power. Cara scanned the manifest on her tablet, frowning. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice low and crisp. "There seems to be an issue with seat 1A. Mai Lin turned, polite but alert. "Issue?" "Yes," Cara replied. "This seat is reserved for one of our legacy priority passengers. Perhaps you're meant to be in row 5? Mai Lin's brows tightened. "We're both on the manifest. Her boarding pass says 1A. She's 5 years old. She's flying under the Guardian Verified program." Vivian Darcy scoffed softly, eyes cutting downward at the little girl's sneakers. "Oh, come now. This is first class, not daycare." Cara hesitated, then leaned closer to Vivian as if sharing a secret between equals. "Let me take care of this." She turned back toward Mai Lin, her smile polite but condescending. "Ma'am, please move the child. We can't have complaints from our elite travelers." Mai Lin's tone trembled but stayed steady. "You're making a mistake. Just scan the QR code on the pass." But Cara didn't. Instead, she took the boarding pass from Arya's tiny hands and said, "Sweetheart, come with me. You'll be more comfortable in row 5. Arya looked up at her, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, darling," Mai Lin murmured, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You didn't." The other passengers shifted in silence. One man stared. Another pretended to type on his phone, but his camera was recording. Cara gestured sharply. "Now please." As Arya stood, her teddy bear slipped from her lap and hit the floor. Cara's shoe accidentally nudged it away. Vivian chuckled. "Guess even toys know where they belong." Arya froze. Her small fingers trembled as she bent to pick up Benny. Mai Lin's voice cracked for the first time. "You don't need to do this. Please." But Cara had already waved over another attendant. "Seat the child in 5C, and let's keep the cabin clear for our preferred guest." The moment stretched like a rubber band pulled to breaking. Arya held her bear tight against her chest as she followed the attendant down the aisle. Her pink jacket brushed against expensive leather seats. Not one passenger spoke up. Not one defended her. By the time she reached row 5, her eyes were wet but silent. She didn't cry loud. She wasn't that kind of child. She just whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe we don't belong there." Mai Lin sat beside her, swallowing the lump in her throat. "It's not about belonging, honey," she said softly. "It's about how people forget what fairness looks like." In first class, Cara reset the seatbelt on 1A and bowed slightly as Vivian Darcy sat down. "Thank you for your patience." Vivian smiled, triumphant. Some order restored at last. Cara exhaled, tapping her tablet to confirm seating compliance. She didn't notice that a small red banner had appeared at the corner of her screen. Service Integrity Monitor. Active. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office overlooking Singapore's skyline, a silent alert blinked on a different screen. Ether Bridge Capital. Integrity Test. Flight 728. Bias detected. Daniel Nguyen, CEO of Etherbridge and Arya's father, folded his hands. The boardroom fell silent. "Timestamp?" he asked. 5 minutes ago, replied his assistant. AI monitor flagged a verbal bias instance by lead crew. Daniel nodded slowly. Do not interfere yet. Let's see how far they go. He turned toward the window, eyes steady. Some lessons, he murmured, can't be taught through meetings, only through experience. Back on Flight 728, Arya stared at the clouds outside row 5. Each one drifted by like slow tears against the glass. She didn't know it yet, but this quiet humiliation, this tiny act of injustice, was already rippling far beyond that cabin. Because sometimes, revenge stories aren't about shouting or fighting back. Sometimes, they begin with a 5-year-old who just wants to keep her teddy bear in her seat. And 5 minutes from now, every person who looked away would wish they hadn't. The hum of the engines filled the silence that Kara Solis had left behind. In row 5, Arya sat small against the wide leather seat. Her teddy bear Benny clutched so tightly his seams puckered. Through the oval window, the rain streaked sideways across the glass like someone had been crying on the outside. Mai Lin tried to distract her with a juice box. See? Apple, your favorite. Arya shook her head. It tastes sad now. The woman swallowed hard. She wanted to tell her niece that people didn't always mean to be cruel, that sometimes they were just tired, or blind, or scared. But the words wouldn't come. They sat there, stuck behind her teeth, like truth always does when you're too polite to scream. Up front, Kara adjusted her scarf and inhaled deeply. The embarrassment of that little scene lingered in her stomach, like spoiled milk. She hated conflict. It made her hands tremble. But she hated rule breakers even more. She tapped her tablet to confirm passenger assignments. A thin red banner still blinked at the top. Service Integrity Monitor. Active. Kara frowned. That system again? She muttered. Meridian Air's new investors had insisted on the AI audit, software that analyzed tone, language, and passenger treatment in real time. To her, it was nonsense. Some public relations stunt. Machines couldn't feel respect. She slid her finger over the alert and hit dismiss. If only she'd known. The system didn't delete anything. It simply took note. Thousands of miles away, in a glass tower overlooking Singapore's harbor, the same alert flashed on a different screen. Sir, it triggered again, said a young analyst, voice tense. Flight 728, verbal bias detected, level 3. Daniel Nguyen, CEO of Etherbridge Capital, looked up from the conference table. He was a man in his 40s, calm in posture but heavy in gaze, the kind of calm that wasn't stillness but control. He turned his chair slowly toward the main monitor. On it, a small playback window displayed Kara's face as she leaned over Arya. The transcript scrolled beside it, every word time-stamped and color-coded. Daniel didn't flinch. He'd expected something like this. Timestamp? He asked. 5 minutes ago, replied his aide. She forcibly reassigned a minor passenger under Guardian verification, prioritizing a legacy guest. And the passenger's response? The aide hesitated. None, sir. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. The boardroom around him waited. I always believe data tells the truth people try to hide, he said. Let's see what they do next. He tapped his pen on the table twice, a quiet, deliberate rhythm. Do not call the airline. Don't stop it. This is still the test. Back in the sky, Kara forced a smile as she served champagne to Vivian Darcy. I must say, Vivian chuckled, children in first class are the worst. They cry, they spill things, they don't belong. You did the right thing, Kara. Kara smiled thinly. Thank you, Ms. Darcy. We strive to maintain exclusivity. Exclusivity. The word rolled off her tongue like something elegant, but it landed heavy in the air, ugly, hollow. She didn't notice one of the business passengers across the aisle lowering his phone, recording the entire exchange. In row 5, Arya tried to color inside her notebook. The crayons kept breaking. Each time she pressed down, a small piece of wax snapped off. Maybe Benny can draw instead, she whispered, handing the stubby crayon to her bear. Mai Lin's throat ached. She wanted to hug the little girl tight and promise it would all make sense someday. But how could she, when she herself had seen this kind of quiet cruelty too many times? She'd been ignored in boardrooms, talked over in meetings, told she was too emotional when she pointed out injustice. Now it was happening to a 5-year-old who had done nothing but smile. So instead of crying, she took out her phone and opened the airline's service app. Her fingers hesitated over the complaint form. She knew most of these reports ended in, "We apologize for the inconvenience." But still, she began to type. At 9:18 a.m., halfway between Singapore and Manila airspace, something invisible shifted. The service integrity monitor sent its second alert. This time, it didn't just record the bias, it flagged an escalation event. A silent chain reaction began. The AI routed its report to the Ethics Oversight Portal, a closed system accessible only to Meridian's executive partners. Within 30 seconds, Daniel's assistant's phone buzzed again. "Sir, the algorithm has moved the case to priority queue." Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Good." He turned to his chief counsel. "Prepare the equity documents. I want our final acquisition notice to go live within the hour, and tell our comms team to draft a statement about fairness in aviation. Something simple, something true." He paused, glancing once more at the still frame of his daughter holding Benny, her eyes wide but dry. "Make sure they spell her name right." On the plane, the intercom crackled unexpectedly. Kara reached for the receiver, startled. Captain?" "Just routine turbulence," the pilot said. "Seatbelt signs on." But a different voice overrode his for a split second. Metallic, monotone. "Attention, crew. This flight is under audit review. Continue service as usual." The announcement ended as quickly as it began. Kara blinked. "Audit? What audit?" Vivian sipped her champagne. "Probably some tech glitch." Kara nodded, forcing composure, but her hands trembled slightly when she picked up the bottle again. In row 5, Arya watched droplets trace down the window, merging and breaking apart again. She didn't understand the word audit, but she felt something new, like the air had changed temperature. She looked at her teddy bear and whispered, "Do you think they'll be nice now?" Mai Lin brushed her hair aside. "Maybe. Sometimes the sky fixes itself." Above the clouds, the aircraft sliced through a shaft of sunlight, and for the first time since takeoff, the cabin felt brighter. Neither Kara nor Vivian noticed the subtle glow blinking on the cabin camera. Integrity protocol activated. Somewhere in Singapore, Daniel looked at the message on his screen. "Integrity report received. Phase 2 ready." He smiled faintly, not cruelly, but with the satisfaction of someone watching justice unfold without a single raised voice. He closed his laptop. "Let's see," he murmured, "what 5 minutes of truth can do to a company that's forgotten what dignity means." And up in the sky, a little girl drew 2 clouds and a smiley face beside them, because even after being humiliated, she still believed the world could be kind again. The cabin of Flight 728 was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only comes after shame. Kara Solis walked briskly down the aisle, every step rehearsed, every smile forced. The tension clung to her uniform like humidity. She kept replaying the moment she'd moved that little girl from 1A, the way the guardian's voice cracked, the way the child hadn't even cried. That was the part that haunted her, the silence. Vivian Darcy, sipping champagne, seemed to revel in it. "Peaceful now, isn't it?" she said aloud, glancing toward the empty first row. "Order restored." Kara gave a polite nod. "Yes, ma'am. Enjoy your flight." But the screen on her service tablet flickered again. For a second, she saw the words, "Integrity audit, escalated, incident logged." She frowned. What now? She tapped the screen twice, but it froze, unresponsive. Then, almost like a heartbeat, a quiet ping sounded through the cabin. The seatbelt sign blinked, though the air was still. In row 5, Arya was drawing a cloud with a broken crayon. The line skipped where the wax had snapped earlier. Her guardian, Mai Lin, tried to distract her. "Do you want to listen to music, sweetheart?" Arya shook her head. "No, I want to watch the sky." She pressed her forehead against the window. The sun was climbing now, turning the clouds below them into soft gold. For a moment, everything looked calm again. Then, through the intercom, a new voice came on. Not the captain's, not Kara's. It was metallic even, like an automated announcement. "Attention crew, service integrity report received. Proceed according to audit protocol." A murmur rippled through the passengers. Vivian frowned, whispering, "What nonsense is that?" Kara froze. Her throat went dry. Audit protocol? She'd never heard that phrase used mid-flight. 50,000 feet below, at the headquarters of Meridian Air, the ethics oversight server had just pinged every executive. Screens in glass offices blinked to life with the same alert. Service integrity failure, Flight 728. In Singapore, inside the boardroom of Etherbridge Capital, Daniel Nguyen watched the chaos unfold on the data wall. His assistant reported, "Sir, it's gone global." The AI system transmitted the flagged footage to Meridian's HQ. Their compliance officer confirmed the event was classified as a Tier 1 ethical breach. Daniel's expression didn't change, but the faintest trace of a smile touched his lips. "Send the acquisition documents," he said calmly. "Activate Phase 2. Across the table, lawyers exchanged glances. "You're really taking control now?" "I'm not taking control," Daniel replied. "I'm giving it back. To decency." On board, the atmosphere shifted like the air before a storm. Passengers were whispering now. "Did you hear that? Audit report? Maybe someone got in trouble. First-class drama, huh?" Kara tried to continue the drink service, but her hands shook. She accidentally spilled a few drops of champagne on Vivian's skirt. "Watch it!" Vivian snapped, glaring. "First you let children ruin the cabin, now this." Kara muttered an apology, blotting the spill. She didn't see the small red light blinking above the galley door. Camera active, internal review. At 9:27 a.m., just as the aircraft passed over Manila's coastline, a message was automatically delivered to every senior employee at Meridian Air. "Effective immediately, the Service Integrity Program has been activated on Flight 728. Audit team will debrief crew upon arrival in Tokyo." In the cockpit, the first officer looked at the captain. "Sir, that's the CEO's plane, isn't it?" The captain frowned. "Not the CEO's, his daughter's." The first officer's hands froze on the controls. "Wait, what?" Back in first class, Vivian's phone buzzed. Her smile faltered when she saw the notification. Trending, #seat for every child. 22K views and climbing. She clicked the link. Someone had uploaded a short clip. Only 15 seconds. But it was damning. Kara's hand taking the boarding pass, Vivian's laughter, and Arya's small voice asking, "Did I do something wrong?" Vivian's heart pounded. "Who filmed this?" she hissed. Kara turned pale. "Oh my God." Within minutes, more passengers received the clip. Whispers turned into glares. The cabin no longer felt like a sanctuary of privilege. It felt like a courtroom. Down below, Daniel's phone vibrated again. His aide spoke quietly. "Sir, your daughter's clip is trending worldwide. 3 major outlets picked it up already. Hashtags are multiplying. Stock's down 2 points, but engagement's off the charts." Daniel looked out the window of his office at the ships docked in the harbor. "Don't worry about the drop," he said. "Truth always dips before it rises." He picked up a folder and signed a document in dark ink. "Transfer of controlling stake, 52% equity, Etherbridge Capital." He handed it to his legal counsel. "File it, effective immediately." In the cabin, the announcement chime rang again. Kara stood frozen as the intercom crackled to life, this time in a male voice, calm and authoritative. "Good morning, passengers. This is Meridian Air Operations Control. As of 10:27 a.m., the airline has come under new management. You are safe. Please remain seated." The voice paused, then added quietly, "We appreciate everyone's patience while we make things right." Vivian's face drained of color. "New management? What is happening?" Kara's knees went weak. No, that can't be." From row 5, Arya looked up at Mai Lin, puzzled. "What does that mean?" Mai Lin exhaled slowly, tears forming. It means the sky just learned how to speak up. For the rest of the flight, no one said much. Vivian sat stiff, staring at her untouched glass. Kara avoided eye contact, her confidence shattered. But a quiet shift moved through the cabin, something beyond fear. It was awareness, the silent realization that kindness should have been the rule all along, not the exception. Outside, clouds parted like curtains, revealing sunlight spilling across the wings. And for the first time that morning, Arya smiled. Not because she'd won, but because she felt seen again. No one on Flight 728 spoke for nearly 10 minutes. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter, as if the plane itself was listening. In row 5, Arya Nguyen had finally fallen asleep, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. Beside her, Mai Lin Tran sat frozen, eyes on the faint reflection of herself in the window. She looked composed, but inside, something churned, a mix of anger, disbelief, and the ache of recognition. She'd seen this before. Different room, same injustice. A flight attendant's soft footsteps approached. "Can I offer you anything, ma'am?" Mai Lin's voice was almost a whisper. "Yes, you can offer me respect. That'll be a first today." The attendant flushed and walked away. At the front of the cabin, Kara Solis tried to steady her breathing. Her hands were slick with sweat. She'd worked 12 years to earn this uniform. 12 years of keeping her hair perfect, her tone neutral, her empathy rehearsed. And now, one child had shattered that illusion. Her service tablet chimed again. She glanced down. Message from HQ. Pending crew debrief on arrival. Mandatory compliance review. She blinked. The wording was too formal for an in-flight note. And below it, a new name appeared under the sender line. Daniel Nguyen, Interim Executive Oversight. She froze. That name, Vivian Darcy, still sipping what remained of her champagne, noticed. "You look pale, dear. Air pressure bothering you?" Kara forced a smile. "Something like that." Below them, at Meridian Air headquarters, the executive floor was chaos. Dozens of notifications flashed across screens, trending hashtags, investor alerts, and internal memos marked urgent. But inside the boardroom, everything was eerily calm. Daniel Nguyen stood at the head of the table, his phone face down, his voice low and deliberate. "We're not issuing a statement yet," he said. "Let the truth breathe." And his communications director stammered. "But sir, social media will handle itself," Daniel interrupted. "What matters is how we respond, quietly, correctly." He turned the phone over and looked at the paused image on its screen, his daughter's small hand holding her teddy bear, her seat gone. "That's my 5-year-old, he said simply. "And she's just shown the world who deserves to fly this airline." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were the signed papers from the acquisition earlier that morning. The ink was barely dry. As of 9:47 a.m. Etherbridge Capital owns 52% of Meridian Air. Effective immediately, I am assuming operational control. The room went silent. Back in the sky, the captain's voice came over the intercom again, but this time, it trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been informed of a management update. Please remain calm." Vivian frowned. "Management update? Mid-flight? Absurd." Kara didn't answer. She felt the blood drain from her face as her tablet refreshed automatically. "Personnel, oversight, pending reassignment review." Reassignment, the airline's polite term for termination. She swallowed hard. For the first time, she noticed the eyes around her, the businessman who'd filmed her earlier, the couple whispering behind their menus, the quiet judgment that filled the air thicker than turbulence. She whispered under her breath, "What have I done?" In row 5, Mai Lin felt her phone buzz. She opened the news app out of reflex and gasped. Breaking. Meridian Air under new ownership following viral bias incident on Flight 728. Beneath the headline was a still frame of Arya, holding her teddy bear. A single tear shimmered on the child's cheek. Mai Lin's heart twisted. "Oh, baby," she murmured. brushing a strand of hair from Arya's forehead. "You didn't have to do anything, and yet you changed everything." 20 minutes later, the aircraft began its descent into Tokyo. The cabin lights dimmed, and the sky outside turned a pale silver. Kara moved slowly through the aisle, collecting empty glasses. Her posture had changed, no longer the upright precision of a flight attendant, but the slumped walk of someone facing an invisible sentence. When she reached row 5, Mai Lin looked up. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither woman spoke. Then Mai Lin said quietly, "That little girl you moved? She's the daughter of the man who just bought your airline." Kara's hand froze midair. "What?" Mai Lin's gaze didn't waver. "He was testing the system, and you failed." Kara's knees weakened. I didn't know." "That's the point," Mai Lin said softly. "You never see the people you look down on. You just see your rules." Kara backed away, words lost somewhere between apology and panic. When the wheels touched down, the entire plane exhaled. The intercom crackled one last time. "This is your captain. We've been asked to remain at the gate for a short debrief by company officials. We appreciate your patience." Vivian rolled her eyes. More bureaucracy. But as the seatbelt signs blinked off, Kara's tablet vibrated again, this time with a short, final message. "Integrity review complete. Crew 728 will report to Gate 12 upon arrival. Interim Chair, Daniel Nguyen." She read it twice, each word heavier than the last. In the first-class cabin, Arya awoke to the soft bump of landing. She blinked sleepily, clutching Benny. "Are we home?" Mai Lin smiled faintly. "Almost." The little girl looked toward the front of the plane. "Will the lady say sorry?" Mai Lin hesitated. "Maybe, but sometimes sorry isn't enough." Arya thought for a moment. "Then maybe she needs to sit in the other seat for a while." Mai Lin smiled, sadly, proudly. "Maybe she does." As passengers began to gather their bags, Kara lingered at the front, staring at seat 1A, the same seat she'd taken away from a 5-year-old. For the first time, she noticed the small detail she'd missed earlier, a folded paper on the tray table. In a child's handwriting it read, "It's okay, I like row 5 too, A." Kara's eyes burned, because somewhere above the clouds, a little girl had already forgiven her, while the world below was just beginning to decide if it would. The jet bridge hissed as it connected to the aircraft door, releasing a gust of cold Tokyo air that smelled faintly of rain and jet fuel. Passengers rose from their seats, phones in hand, faces glowing with the reflected light of a headline that had already circled the globe. 5-year-old removed from first-class seat. Her father now owns the airline. Every glance toward row 5 carried the same stunned curiosity. Some people looked ashamed, some recorded discreetly, others simply stared, as if the little girl before them were proof that the world could still surprise them. Mai Lin Chun adjusted Arya's pink jacket and lifted her bag from the overhead bin. "Ready, sweetheart?" Arya nodded, holding Benny the teddy bear tight against her chest. "Do I have to talk to anyone?" Mai Lin smiled gently. "Only if you want to." She didn't tell the child that dozens of cameras waited at the gate, that executives in dark suits had already lined up near the terminal door, that the very people who'd humiliated her 5-year-old niece were now waiting to be judged by the person they'd ignored. At the front of the cabin, Kara Sola stood by the galley, her palms damp, her breath shallow. She watched the seatbelt light fade, and with it, the last of her composure. Vivian Darcy stood a few feet away, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "Ridiculous," Vivian muttered. "All this over a misunderstanding. People are so dramatic online." Kara didn't respond. She couldn't, because she'd seen the headline too, and her own face was in it. The 15-second clip had gone viral across every platform, her polite, patronizing tone, Vivian's condescending laugh, Arya's small, confused voice. There was no defending that image now. The door opened with a mechanical sigh. Outside, a wall of airport staff waited. Security, corporate representatives, and behind them, Daniel Nguyen in a black coat, his posture calm, his eyes unreadable. Kara froze when she saw him. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. That was worse. He looked measured. "Mr. Nguyen," stammered the captain, stepping forward, hat in hand. We didn't realize you were on board in proxy." "I wasn't," Daniel said quietly. "But my daughter was." Every sound in the jet bridge stopped. The air itself seemed to pull back. When Arya stepped off the plane, she didn't recognize all the faces staring at her. She only recognized one, her father's. "Daddy," she said, running into his arms. Benny the bear squished between them. Daniel knelt, smoothing her hair. "Hey, sunshine, you did great." "I didn't do anything," she said softly. He smiled. "Exactly." Behind them, Kara hesitated at the cabin door. Vivian nudged her. "Go on. He's not going to bite." Kara turned, her heart thudding. She walked slowly down the jet bridge toward Daniel, her polished shoes clicking against the metal floor. "Sir," she began, I want to apologize." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "For what?" Kara swallowed. "For forgetting who I was serving." Daniel nodded once. "That's a start." She blinked back tears. "I thought I was protecting order, but I was protecting comfort, the wrong kind." He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he turned toward the nearby window where rain traced lines down the glass. "You know what the hardest part about power is, Ms. Solis?" She shook her head. "It's learning that it's supposed to protect dignity, not pride." Kara looked down. "I understand." "Good," he said softly. "Then you'll understand why today can't end with just an apology." Her chest tightened. "You're firing me?" Daniel looked almost sad. "I'm holding you accountable. That's different." Reporters crowded near the gate entrance now, their microphones raised, flashes reflecting off the polished tile. One called out, "Mr. Nguyen, is it true your daughter's experience triggered a full audit of Meridian Air?" Daniel glanced at the cameras, then back at Arya. "My daughter didn't trigger an audit," he said. "She revealed a mirror." The room went still. Vivian shifted uncomfortably behind the line of executives. Her expensive perfume could no longer mask the scent of fear. Inside a nearby conference room, the debrief began. Kara sat at one end of the long table, flanked by the captain, Vivian, and a few other staff. Daniel stood opposite them, the rain-muted light from the windows outlining his calm silhouette. Mai Lin sat nearby, Arya perched on her lap, quiet but observant. Daniel placed a tablet on the table. "This," he said, pressing play, "is how the world sees us now." The viral video played in absolute silence. Every laugh, every gesture, every word from Kara and Vivian echoed louder in the sterile room. By the end, even Vivian's hands were trembling. Daniel folded his arms. "You didn't break a policy," he said evenly. "You broke something bigger, trust. The belief that fairness lives here." Vivian tried to recover. "It was just a seating error. Surely we can—" "It was never about the seat," Daniel interrupted, his tone calm but cutting. "It was about who you thought deserved to sit there." He turned toward Kara. "You'll both be relieved of duty for now, but I'm offering you a choice. You can walk away quietly, or you can help us rebuild this system the right way." Kara blinked. "You'd let me stay?" "Stay," he said, "and help teach what you failed to see. Every system that punishes bias should also know how to redeem it." Vivian looked disgusted. "You're turning this into a lesson?" Daniel met her gaze. "Exactly. That's what leadership is." Arya tugged gently at her father's sleeve. "Daddy?" "Yes, honey? Can I say something?" He smiled. "Of course." The room quieted as she stood on her chair, clutching Benny. Her voice was small but clear. "I don't want them to lose their jobs," she said. "I just want them to learn how to sit next to everyone." No one breathed. Daniel looked down at her, eyes soft. "You heard the boss," he said gently. A few quiet laughs broke the tension, followed by a ripple of applause, hesitant, then growing. Even Kara couldn't help it. She smiled through her tears. Outside, the storm had finally passed. Sunlight pooled across the wet tarmac, reflecting off the aircraft's silver body. For the first time in years, Daniel Nguyen felt that maybe the sky itself was learning something too. And as he lifted Aria into his arms, she looked out toward the runway and whispered, "It's prettier when everyone gets to see the light." The next morning, sunlight broke through the Tokyo skyline, glinting off the glass towers like a quiet confession. The city was waking up to headlines that no one could ignore. Meridian Air's first-class scandal. A 5-year-old sparks global conversation on dignity. CEO Daniel Nguyen's daughter was the passenger removed mid-flight. A new standard for the skies, equity at 35,000 feet. At Meridian Air headquarters, a floor-to-ceiling screen streamed non-stop coverage. The world wasn't just watching the story, they were dissecting it. Talk shows debated bias in luxury travel. Journalists replayed the 15-second clip that changed an airline. And millions of strangers had picked sides between humiliation and hope. Inside the boardroom, Daniel Nguyen sat at the head of the long table, calm as a storm before thunder. Beside him was Mai Lin, and across from them, a handful of senior executives who now looked smaller than their titles. Cara Solis entered quietly, her uniform folded neatly over her arm. She wasn't wearing the confident smile of a flight attendant anymore. Only the face of someone who had spent the night re-watching her own mistake in the glow of a phone screen. Daniel nodded to her. "Thank you for coming." She hesitated. "I didn't think I'd be welcome here." "You're not dismissed," Daniel said. "You're here to learn." At the far end of the table, Vivian Darcy sat rigid, her diamond bracelet glinting under the lights. She'd been escorted by corporate request, an uncomfortable invitation. She looked around, unimpressed. "I assume this is the part where we make a public apology?" Daniel didn't look at her. "No," he said. "This is the part where we rebuild one." Vivian scoffed. "The internet will forget. They always do." Mai Lin leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "You're right. The internet forgets. But the people who were watching, the ones who felt that sting in their gut when you said, 'people like her,' they won't forget. They saw themselves in that child." The room fell silent. On the large monitor, Daniel played a short clip. Footage not from the viral video, but from another passenger's recording. The camera shook as a quiet voice spoke off-screen. "That little girl did nothing wrong. Someone should say something." A pause. Then another voice whispered, "Not worth the trouble." Daniel stopped the video. "That," he said, "is the sound of every injustice that ever survived." Silence. He turned to Cara. "You can't fix what you don't face. So, what do you see when you watch yourself in that video?" Cara's eyes glistened. "I see a woman trying too hard to keep control and losing her humanity in the process." "And what do you feel?" She took a breath. "Ashamed. Not because I was filmed, but because I was seen." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then there's hope for you." Across the table, Vivian crossed her arms. "And what about me? You going to make me a symbol of everything wrong with the elite?" Daniel met her gaze calmly. "You made yourself that symbol. I can only choose what happens next." Vivian shifted in her chair, the first crack of fear showing in her expression. "What happens next?" He gestured toward the screen. A slide appeared titled, "The Dignity Initiative, Internal Reform Program." "This is what happens next," Daniel said. "Every employee, every legacy client, every partner, mandatory empathy training. Flight crews will rotate seats once a month. Executives will spend a day in customer service. And from today forward, no passenger, regardless of age, color, or status, will ever be removed from their seat without formal review." Vivian's lips parted in disbelief. "You're turning an airline into a morality school?" Daniel's tone stayed even. "No, I'm turning it into a reflection of the world we claim to serve." At the back of the room, a small sound interrupted the tension, a soft laugh. Everyone turned. It was Aria, sitting quietly in a corner chair, her teddy bear on the table, its tiny paw resting beside a glass of juice. "I think it's a good idea," she said. "People should learn what it feels like to sit somewhere else." Vivian blinked. You brought your daughter to this meeting? Daniel smiled faintly. She has more perspective than most of us. Arya looked up at the adults, unbothered by the cameras recording every moment. My teacher says the sky is big enough for everyone. Maybe airplanes should be too. No one had a reply. An hour later, as the meeting adjourned, Kara lingered by the window overlooking the runway. The planes below taxied in perfect lines, orderly, mechanical, obedient. But for the first time, she saw more than machinery. She saw people. She turned to Daniel. I want to help, not because I deserve it, but because that little girl believed I could be better. Daniel nodded. Then start with the next flight. You'll shadow our new ethics team. The best way to fix a broken system is from inside it. Kara's eyes filled again, but this time not from guilt. Thank you. Mai Lin smiled gently. Just remember, the real first class isn't the seat. It's how you treat the person sitting next to you. Outside the building, reporters waited as Daniel, Mai Lin, and Arya stepped into the bright Tokyo afternoon. One called out, Mr. Nguyen, is this the end of the story? Daniel paused, looking down at his daughter, who was spinning her bear by one arm. No, he said. This is the beginning of a better one. Arya tugged his sleeve. Can I name the new rule? He chuckled. What would you call it? The seat of dignity, she said proudly. He nodded, smiling. Perfect. That night, the first seat of dignity plaque was quietly installed on Flight 728's refurbished first-class cabin. No press release, no cameras. Just a small engraving on the wall beside 1A. Respect is non-negotiable. Everyone deserves their seat in the sky. And as the plane lifted into the dark, Arya watched from her father's office window, her reflection shimmering against the night clouds. For the first time, the sky didn't feel divided. It felt shared. 3 days after the Tokyo incident, the world was still talking about Flight 728. News anchors called it the 5-minute reckoning. Influencers dissected it frame by frame, some praising Arya's quiet courage, others calling it the gentlest revolution the skies had ever seen. But for Meridian Air, the conversation wasn't about viral fame anymore. It was about survival. Inside the headquarters boardroom, the air was tense. Screens on the wall displayed live data, stock price volatility, trending hashtags, flight ratings. Every executive looked exhausted, their voices low, their confidence broken. And at the end of the long oak table, Daniel Nguyen stood alone, sleeves rolled up, the skyline of Tokyo glowing behind him. Numbers will recover, he said evenly. Reputation won't, unless we earn it. No one spoke. He let the silence hang just long enough to make them feel it. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, a different flight crew sat in a cramped break room watching the replay on a small mounted TV. Man, one attendant whispered. That's the same uniform as ours. Another shook her head. You can feel it in the kid's voice. She didn't even cry. She just accepted it. That's what broke me. The room fell quiet. For a moment, they weren't crew members. They were witnesses. And in that silence, something began to shift. By the weekend, seat of dignity had replaced the scandal hashtag. Passengers began posting stories of kindness. Flight attendants offering to swap seats with nervous travelers. Captains greeting economy passengers by name. A clip from a New York-London route went viral. A first-class passenger offering his seat to an elderly woman with mobility issues. When reporters asked why, he simply said, because dignity shouldn't need a ticket upgrade. The comment section filled with hearts, tears, and one sentence repeated thousands of times. Justice at 35,000 feet. Back at Meridian HQ, Kara Solis was now part of the newly formed Ethics and Empathy program. Her first assignment wasn't glamorous. It was auditing old training manuals, rewriting policies she once enforced without question. She sat at a small desk, surrounded by papers, and paused on one line that used to be standard. Prioritize our most valuable customers. She took a red pen and crossed it out. Then she wrote beneath it, Every customer is valuable. Start there. It was a small sentence, but her hand trembled as she wrote it. Because for the first time in years, she felt like she was serving people, not hierarchy. In Boston, where the Nguyen family lived, the media had camped outside their townhouse for 2 straight days. When Daniel finally emerged, he wasn't wearing a suit or an expensive coat, just jeans and a black jacket. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Nguyen, what's next for Meridian Air?" Daniel paused at the gate. "A simpler goal," he said, "teaching the world that fairness is just good business." "Do you think people will forgive Meridian?" another asked. He smiled faintly. "They already have. They just need to see that we've learned." That same morning, in a small classroom at an international school in Tokyo, Arya Nguyen sat cross-legged on the floor during story time. Her teacher had chosen a book about kindness, one of those illustrated tales about sharing and courage. Halfway through, a classmate raised his hand. "Is it true you were on the plane everyone talks about?" Arya nodded, a little shy. "What did you do?" the boy asked. She thought for a second, then shrugged. "Nothing." Her teacher smiled. "Sometimes nothing is the most powerful thing." Arya looked down at her teddy bear, Benny, now with a tiny airline pin attached to its ear, the Seat of Dignity emblem. She squeezed it gently. "Daddy says the sky remembers everything," she said. Across the Pacific, Kara received an email from Daniel. Subject, Flight 301, tomorrow. "You'll be shadowing the Tokyo crew on their first route under the new program. Remember, don't lecture them, just listen." She reread it 3 times, then closed her laptop and exhaled. It was her second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. That night, she stood by her apartment window, watching airplanes cut silver lines across the dark sky. She thought of Arya's face, the quiet forgiveness in her eyes. "People like her," Kara whispered, echoing the very words she'd once used so wrongly, "are the reason the rest of us get better." The next morning, when Kara boarded Flight 301, she wasn't in uniform. She wore plain clothes, blending in with the passengers. The new flight lead, a young attendant named Naomi, greeted her warmly. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Window or aisle?" Kara smiled. "Doesn't matter. They both show the sky." The flight took off smoothly, and for the first time in her career, she saw the job from the other side, from the seat of humility. When a mother with a toddler dropped her juice cup, Kara knelt to help without hesitation. Naomi looked over, surprised. "You've done this before?" Kara smiled softly. "Yeah, but never like this." When they landed in Manila, a quiet applause broke out among passengers after the captain's final words. "On behalf of Meridian Air, we thank you for giving us another chance to earn your trust." Kara stepped off the plane with her heart lighter than she could remember. Outside the gate, a plaque gleamed under the morning light, just like the one Daniel had installed on 1A. "Respect is non-negotiable." She touched the engraved letters with her fingertips and smiled. The same skies that once carried her shame now carried her redemption. And somewhere, a little girl was probably looking out another window, believing again that even the highest places could learn how to be kind. By Monday morning, the story had moved from outrage to arithmetic. News tickers crawled with numbers like confessions. Meridian Air, 6% at open, plus 3% by noon. Bookings holding steady on regional routes. First-class cancellations tapering off after the weekend freefall. Analysts on cable shows tried to sound objective, but even their graphs had a pulse, dipping on the humiliation, rising on the reforms. Inside Meridian's headquarters, a second screen told the part the market couldn't, a live dashboard labeled Seat of Dignity. It tracked training signups, complaint resolution times, and a new metric Daniel insisted on measuring, witness intervention rate, the percentage of bystanders who spoke up when something felt wrong. It started at 4%. No one in the room was proud of that number. "We're not selling tickets," Daniel said, hands on the edge of the table. "We're buying back trust. Measure what earns it." The CFO cleared his throat. "We can allocate $10 million to the fund without disrupting fleet refresh. Any more and—" "10 is fine," Daniel replied. But I care more about where it lands than what the headline says. Aim the grants at routes with the worst historical bias reports. Start at the hubs. Make the change visible where it's been invisible the longest. He looked at the small team of analysts and operations leads, people who used to speak in acronyms and margins. Today they took notes like students in a class that finally mattered. Publish the numbers weekly, he added. Even the ugly ones, especially the ugly ones. Across the hall, Cara Solis faced a different math. Her orientation packet for the Ethics and Empathy program sat open, pages dog-eared and inked with careful notes. The first module asked her to write a failure in 10 words or fewer. She stared at the prompt, pen hovering, then wrote, "I protected comfort and forgot the person in front of me." A soft knock. Naomi, the young flight lead from Flight 301, stepped in with 2 coffees. "You look like you're studying for a bar exam." Cara managed to smile. "Feels like I'm atoning for one." Naomi settled beside her. "You know what surprised me most on our flight? You said thank you to every passenger who made your job harder. The mother with the spilled juice, the man with the overstuffed carry-on." Cara's laugh was small but real. 12 years of telling people where to put their bags. I forgot the difference between directing and welcoming." Naomi tapped the packet. "Second module's a ride-along in economy. You ready?" Cara nodded. "I've been ready since row 5. At a rented studio across town, a PR shoot was underway. Simple black backdrop, a single chair, a lav mic. No airline logos, no music bed. Just people telling the truth into a lens. A retired teacher from Manila talked about being bumped from her seat for a corporate traveler. A dad described learning to ask flight crews for help when his autistic son melted down. A young businesswoman admitted she'd once stayed silent when she shouldn't have. Then the camera tilted, and Vivian Darcy sat in the chair. The crew went quiet. Even in street clothes, Vivian wore posture like a status symbol. She adjusted the mic, looked past the lens, cleared her throat. "I don't want to be here," she began. The director flinched. Vivian held up a hand. "But I need to be." Her voice shook, not with performance, but with something like friction between the person she'd been and the one trying to arrive. "I used to think first class was proof I mattered," she said. "Turns out it was just proof I could pay to be insulated. I saw a child and didn't see a person. I saw a policy and called it order." She exhaled, eyes on her lap. "I'm not asking for forgiveness on camera. I'm asking to be useful off it. Put me where it's uncomfortable. Put me in the training. Let people see me learn the hard way." The director glanced at Daniel, who stood in the doorway. He gave a single nod. "Keep it." By afternoon, the Seat of Dignity Fund went live with a quiet post. No ribbon cutting, no staged smile. The page listed 3 programs: family seating protections, guardian verification support at check-in, and scholarships for hospitality workers to complete bias-aware service credentials. 1,000 comments bloomed under the announcement. The most liked said, "Less apology, more architecture." That night, Daniel joined a stream town hall moderated by a journalist known for asking questions that pin people to the truth. Comments poured by the hundreds per minute, the chat a thicket of hope and skepticism. "Mr. Nguyen," the moderator said, "people keep asking variations of the same question. Why didn't you just fire everyone and move on?" Daniel leaned closer to the lens. "Because I don't want a cleaner headline. I want a better industry. If we punish publicly and learn privately, nothing changes. We're making the learning just as public as the harm. Isn't that risky?" "It's honest," he said. "Risky is pretending a brand is moral by default. Turns out morality needs a schedule. Ours runs daily." A pause. Then, "How's your daughter doing?" Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that softens a whole screen. "She asked if planes can make shadows on the ocean. I told her yes. Then she asked if they can make shade for people who need it. I told her we're trying." The next morning, Aria stood at the window of Daniel's office, drawing contrails on the glass with her finger. Benny the bear leaned against a stack of policy drafts like he was guarding them. "What are those?" she asked. "Rules," Daniel said. "Promises, really." Do they work if people don't read them? He laughed. They work if people live them. She thought about that, then pressed her palm to the glass, leaving a tiny print that the sun lit up like a seal. Can I read one? Daniel handed her a page with a single sentence at the top, the newest line they'd voted to add. No passenger will be reseated for someone's comfort if it costs someone else's dignity. Aria traced the words with her finger. That's a good promise. It is, Daniel said. Now we keep it. By week's end, the witness intervention rate crept from 4% to 7%. A small number, unless you were the person on the receiving end of someone finally speaking up. In 100 cabins, 1,000 small courages began tallying themselves in ways no spreadsheet had captured before. Kara finished her economy ride along, hair out of its careful bun, cheeks flushed from fetching extra waters and hunting down a lost stuffed rabbit. As passengers filed off, a young boy waved his toy in the air. "Found him!" he shouted. The cabin clapped like a tiny theater. Kara smiled until her face hurt. Outside the door, a small brass plaque caught the light. The kind that doesn't need to brag to be seen. Respect is non-negotiable. She touched it once, like a blessing. Then she turned back to help an elderly man with his bag, and a teenager anxious about turbulence, and a parent trying to keep a baby from waking. Numbers were moving, names were changing, and in the slow accounting of a culture relearning itself, the cost of comfort had finally been balanced against the price of dignity. It began as a routine morning at Meridian Air HQ, but nothing felt routine anymore. The lobby buzzed with reporters, staff hurried with renewed purpose, and on every office screen, the Seat of Dignity dashboard pulsed like a living heartbeat, steady, growing. Yet in the corner office on the top floor, Daniel Nguyen wasn't watching graphs. He was reading letters. Stacks of them, handwritten, some smudged with travel stamps, others typed on cheap paper. Notes from passengers, crew, even children. One read, "I used to dread flying because I felt invisible. Now, for the first time, I was called by my name. Thank you." Another, from a retired flight attendant. "Your story reminded me why I joined this job 30 years ago, to protect people, not privilege." Daniel smiled faintly. The world had shifted, slowly, awkwardly, but undeniably. At the same time, Kara Solis stood inside Hangar 6, where the newly repainted Meridian Air 728 gleamed beneath the floodlights. The aircraft had become a symbol now, a moving monument of humility. On its nose, in small silver letters, were 4 words chosen by Aria herself. Every seat holds dignity. Kara brushed her hand over the paint, still drying in places. For months, she'd avoided mirrors. But lately, she'd found reflection comforting. It meant she was still trying. A mechanic approached her. "You're the one from the video, right?" Kara tensed. "Yes," he nodded. "My daughter saw it on her tablet. She said you looked scared, not mean. She said she hopes you got better." Kara smiled. "Tell her I'm working on it." Back inside headquarters, a meeting gathered the new leadership team. Investors dialed in from New York and London, their expressions cautious. Daniel began without slides. "We've regained 13% in equity and almost all our public trust," he said. "But that's not success. Success is when we stop treating compassion like crisis management." An older board member frowned. "You can't run an airline on feelings, Daniel." Daniel looked straight at him. "No, but you can crash one without them." A quiet murmur of agreement moved around the room. That same afternoon, in Tokyo, Mai Lin met with a group of trainees, new hires entering the cabin crew program under the reformed guidelines. Most were young, idealistic, nervous. She wrote on the whiteboard, "Quiet power." "Does anyone know what that means?" she asked. A trainee raised her hand. "Like doing the right thing without shouting about it?" Mai Lin smiled. "Exactly. Quiet power is when dignity speaks louder than anger. It's what that little girl on Flight 728 showed the whole world." The class leaned in. "She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just existed, and the system exposed itself." Her voice softened. That's the power I want you to have. Not the power to punish, but to protect. The room fell silent. Not the fearful kind, but the reverent kind. The kind that changes people. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Arya Nguyen was sitting in her father's office again, this time with coloring pencils scattered across the desk. On one sheet, she was drawing an airplane full of smiling passengers. What's that? Daniel asked, glancing up from his laptop. The new plane, Arya said. I gave it more windows so everyone can see the sky. Daniel chuckled. I think our engineers will like that. She looked up. Daddy, did the lady say sorry yet? Daniel hesitated. Yes, in her own way. Did you forgive her? He paused again, then nodded. I did. But more importantly, she forgave herself. Arya smiled. That's good. Benny says the sky doesn't like grudges. Daniel laughed. I'll tell our pilots to remember that. Later that week, Kara was invited to speak at an aviation ethics forum in Singapore. It was her first time in front of an audience since the incident. Her palms were damp, but her voice, when it came, was steady. I used to believe my job was about order, she began. But I confused order with obedience. The truth is, dignity doesn't interrupt service. It defines it. She paused, glancing at the small crowd, pilots, attendants, executives. Some had tears in their eyes. Flight 728 taught me something no manual ever did. Systems don't collapse because of bad people. They collapse because good people look away. And I looked away. She exhaled. Not anymore. When she finished, the applause wasn't loud. It was soft, like the sound of forgiveness taking root. That night, as flights departed from hubs around the world, Meridian's new policies quietly took effect. Cabin lights dimmed, service carts rolled out, and over the intercoms, a simple message replaced the old corporate greeting. Welcome aboard. Every seat on this flight holds equal value. We're honored to have you here. Passengers looked up, surprised at the phrasing. Some smiled, some even clapped, and somewhere over the Pacific, on Flight 728's renewed route, an elderly woman turned to a young attendant and said, I read about this airline, the one with the little girl. The attendant smiled. We all did, ma'am. She's the reason we fly better now. Back in Daniel's office, the last letter of the day lay unopened. He picked it up and read the childlike handwriting on the envelope. From a passenger you don't know. Inside, it said, My mom says people only change when they're embarrassed, but I think they change when someone shows them how. Tell your daughter thank you for showing us. Daniel stared at the page, eyes blurring for a moment. Then he looked out at the night sky where a dozen blinking lights moved steadily toward the horizon. Maybe the world didn't need heroes shouting for justice. Maybe it just needed quiet reminders. Small, steady, human. He turned off the lamp, letting the city glow replace it. And far above, one plane traced a clean white line across the dark, as if the sky itself had signed the lesson. The morning sun spilled over the Tokyo runway like gold on glass. A new flight, Meridian Air 001, stood ready for boarding. The cabin shimmered with quiet pride. White seats stitched with silver thread, soft blue lighting, and a brass plaque near the entrance that read simply, Every seat holds dignity. But this flight was special. It wasn't about luxury, it was about closure. At the gate, Daniel Nguyen stood with his daughter Arya, her pink jacket a small echo of the story that had started everything. Nearby stood Kara Solis, dressed in a crisp but modest uniform, the first she'd worn since being reinstated. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly around her service tablet. Are you ready? Daniel asked. Kara nodded, eyes steady. I think so. This time, I know what I'm flying for. Arya beamed. Benny's ready too. She lifted her teddy bear, now wearing a tiny pilot's hat. Daniel chuckled. Then that's our good luck charm. Inside the terminal, journalists whispered and clicked photos from a respectful distance. This wasn't a press stunt. It was a promise. Meridian had invited the families of passengers who had experienced bias, Staff who had resigned in protest years ago, and even critics who'd once doubted the company could change. When boarding began, Arya and Daniel were the first to step aboard. Kara greeted them at the door, her smile calm, genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Nguyen." "Miss Nguyen?" Arya grinned. "Hi, Miss Kara. Do I sit in 1A again?" Kara knelt to meet her eyes. "You can sit wherever you like, sweetheart, but 1A's waiting for you." Arya glanced up at her father. "Is it okay?" Daniel nodded. "It's yours. Always was." As passengers settled in, Kara's crew began the new Seat of Dignity welcome protocol, a simple gesture that had replaced the old rote safety announcement. She took the intercom and said softly, "Good morning. Before we begin our journey, we'd like to thank you for choosing to fly with us. Every person on this plane matters equally, and every seat you hold carries respect. Our crew's first duty is your safety and your dignity." No applause, no cheer, just silence filled with something stronger than noise, understanding. Mai Lin, seated behind Arya, looked out the window, remembering the day when that same seat had been taken from a child who'd done nothing wrong. This time, the light pouring through it felt like justice made visible. As the plane climbed through the clouds, Kara moved down the aisle with quiet focus. Every "excuse me" was genuine, every "thank you" sincere. When she reached row 5, the seat where Arya had once been exiled, she stopped. No one sat there. It had been left open intentionally. On the headrest was a small embroidered label, Row 5C, the beginning. Kara placed a single flower there, a pale white camellia, symbol of apology in Japanese culture. Then she whispered under her breath, "Thank you for teaching me." At cruising altitude, Daniel took out his tablet. Across the screen, live metrics from the Seat of Dignity Fund flickered in real time. New reports of intervention, community partnerships, employee progress. The number of bias escalations had dropped 83% in 3 months. But more meaningful than that was a new column recently added, "Thank you messages received." It was already in the thousands. He smiled faintly. "We're doing it, Arya," he said. She looked up from coloring Benny's pilot license. "Doing what?" "Making sure no one ever feels small again." Arya's voice was soft but certain. "Then Benny says we win." Hours later, turbulence rocked the cabin. A minor jolt, but enough to unsettle passengers. Kara took a deep breath, grabbed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. This will pass soon. We're right here with you." Her tone was warm, calm, human. Not a script, not a mask. As the plane steadied, an elderly woman in row 2 whispered, "You're the one from the video, aren't you?" Kara turned, unsure whether to brace or smile. "Yes, ma'am." The woman reached out, touching her wrist gently. "You were cruel once. Now you're kind. That's rarer than perfection." Kara blinked back tears. "Thank you." When the plane landed in Singapore, a small ceremony awaited them. Not a crowd, just a group of employees, passengers, and students from aviation schools, gathered near the gate to dedicate the new Seat of Dignity program. Daniel stepped forward, microphone in hand. "This airline was once known for privilege," he began. "Now, I hope it's known for purpose." He turned toward Kara. "This flight wasn't about proving we're better. It's about showing that change is possible when accountability and compassion sit next to each other." Kara's throat tightened. "Thank you for giving me the chance to try again." Then, to everyone's surprise, Daniel handed the microphone to Arya. The 5-year-old clutched Benny and stood on her tiptoes. "Hi," she said shyly. My daddy says airplanes teach people how to share the sky. I think they should also teach us how to share kindness, because there's always enough of it." The crowd went still. Then, slowly, applause rose, not thunderous, but deep, heartfelt, echoing through the gate like wind through wings. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Daniel watched Flight 001 taxi down the runway for its return trip. The engines roared softly, almost like a heartbeat. Beside him, Kara stood with her cap in her hands. You think the world will remember this flight? Daniel smiled. They won't remember the flight. They'll remember how it made them feel. Arya tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, look! Above the runway, a second plane was taking off. Two trails of white crossed in the twilight sky, one fading, one just beginning. Daniel watched the lines intersect, then whispered, "That's what forgiveness looks like." And for the first time since Flight 728, the sky itself seemed to nod back. A week after Flight 001, the boardroom at Meridian Air didn't look like a boardroom anymore. The long mahogany table had been pushed to the walls, replaced by a circle of simple chairs. No name placards, no head of the table, just space, on purpose. Daniel Nguyen stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled above his elbows. Outside, planes shouldered the morning light, lifting one after another into a clear blue. Today isn't about announcing what we've done, he said. It's about deciding what we will keep doing when the cameras move on. Around him sat people who didn't usually get invited into rooms like this. 2 gate agents from Narita, a wheelchair services coordinator from LA, a junior scheduler from Manila, 3 cabin crew from different seniority bands, and Cara Solis, wearing her uniform but not her old armor. Against the back wall, Mai Lin took notes on a tablet, every sentence clean, uncluttered. She'd asked to help shape training content. Stories teach faster than slide decks, she'd told Daniel. He agreed. On a small screen in the corner, a live dashboard pulsed. Seat of dignity metrics, training completion, response times, witness intervention rate. It had nudged from 7% to 12%, tiny to a banker, huge to a person who just needed one stranger to speak. Let's start where it's hard, Daniel said. Where are we still failing? A gate agent lifted her hand. Night flights. When crews are stretched thin, it's easier to default to status. We need a fatigue protocol for dignity the way we have one for safety. Logged, Mai Lin said, tapping. A junior scheduler cleared his throat. Ancillary fees. Families get split because algorithms chase upgrades. If dignity is real, there's a line we don't cross for revenue. Cara leaned forward. We can hard code that line. No receipt for someone's comfort if it costs someone else's dignity. Daniel nodded once. Policy team, make it non-overridable. Hard guardrail. He looked around the circle. Who's next? A seasoned purser spoke softly. We need to give crews a way to repair in real time, not after a headline. A script that starts with "I'm sorry" and ends with a seat, not a voucher. Write it, Daniel said. We'll rehearse it like we rehearse evacuations. The room breathed. The kind of collective exhale that happens when people realize the door isn't decorative. It's open. After lunch, the circle expanded. A group of union reps arrived, along with Vivian Darcy in plain clothes, her diamond bracelet tucked inside her bag. She'd asked to sit in, not to speak. Daniel led her. Transparency check, he began. We're publishing kindness as a KPI next quarter, not as PR. As operating truth. Questions? A union leader raised a brow. You're going to score crews on compassion? Cara answered before Daniel could. We're going to support crews on compassion. Score the system, not the person. If one cabin keeps failing, we add staff, change schedules, and fix the playbook. Accountability without ammunition. The union leader glanced at Daniel. You okay with your ex-critic taking point? Daniel smiled. She earned that seat. Vivian shifted, then finally spoke. What seat do I earn? Silence. Not brutal, expectant. Daniel considered her for a long beat. The uncomfortable one. He pointed to the wall, where a rollout plan for legacy client renewal hung. You'll help redesign privilege so it serves people who don't have it. You'll sit and coach on our busiest routes and file daily reports on what respect costs and where it breaks. Vivian nodded, jaw tight, eyes honest. I'll show up. Good, Daniel said. Don't be impressive. Be useful. Across town that evening, a public forum filled a renovated theater. No VIP rows, no branded backdrop. Just a microphone on a wooden stage and a hand-painted sign. Every seat holds dignity. Community night. A young mother told a story about a flight where a stranger swapped seats so she could sit beside her autistic son. A baggage handler shared how he'd learned to squat eye level when giving directions to an elderly passenger who lipid read. A teenager admitted she filmed a small kindness and didn't post it because some things work better in the heart than on a feed. Near the end, Kara stepped up to the mic. The audience recognized her. A rustle ran through the room. She took a breath. "I used to think dignity was a courtesy you extended when convenient," she said. "Now I know it's a duty you carry when it's not." She glanced toward the back, where a little girl sat swinging her legs in the aisle seat, teddy bear on her lap. "I'm not here to be forgiven," Kara continued. "I'm here to keep the promise that I broke. Every shift, every seat." A quiet clap began, then spread. Subdued, not showy. The kind of applause that says we'll hold you to it. A day later, regulators convened an industry roundtable. Executives from rival carriers came ready to deflect. Daniel came with a binder, thin but dense. Open source dignity, a framework for aviation. It had no watermark and no legal booby traps. Just playbooks, scripts, and the metric definitions Meridian now used. A competitor smirked. "Why give away your advantage?" Daniel shrugged. "Because I'm not interested in cornering kindness." A regulator leafed through the recommendations. "Weekly public reports? You'll publish failures?" "Light fixes rot," Daniel said. "If we hide our gaps, our crews carry the blame, and our passengers carry the bruises." The room quieted. "Adopt what you want," he added. "But if you take it, don't rename it. Don't sterilize it. Keep the word dignity. People recognize themselves inside it." At home that night, Daniel found Arya asleep on the couch, Benny guarding a stack of crayons. On the coffee table lay another of her drawings. A plane with too many windows to count. In the corner, stick figures waved across aisles. Above them, in a child's careful letters, "Share the sky." He tucked a blanket over her and sat for a moment in the hush, the kind that only arrives after a storm has decided to leave. Mai Lin joined him, setting tea on the table. "How many rooms did you open today?" "Enough to feel the draft," he said, smiling. She leaned back. "You know, the internet will move on." "I hope it does," he answered. "I don't want this to be a trending topic. I want it to be boring policy." Mai Lin laughed softly. "Boring the way safety is boring." "Exactly." He looked at Arya's drawing again, the extra windows, the waving hands. "She keeps designing planes with more ways to look out." "Maybe that's the point," Mai Lin said. "More windows, fewer walls." The next sunrise found Kara at the jet bridge, palms open on the cool rail, watching passengers approach. A man in a suit, a woman with a cane, a student with a backpack too heavy for her shoulders, a toddler dragging a blanket like a comet tail. "Good morning," Kara said to each of them, and meant it. Not because anyone was filming, not because she was on thin ice, but because the standard had finally replaced the statement. As the last passenger boarded, she glanced at the small brass plaque by the door. It caught the light and threw it back, as if the metal itself had learned to echo. "Respect is non-negotiable." Kara touched the words with 2 fingers, a ritual she'd made up and decided to keep. Then she stepped into the cabin where the work was, where the promise lived, and where, seat by seat, the sky kept answering back. The first anniversary of Flight 728 didn't begin with a press release or a ceremony. It began quietly, with Arya Nguyen sitting by her bedroom window, watching planes carve silver lines across a pale morning sky. She still drew them, though her art looked different now. Fewer clouds, more people waving from the windows. Her father, Daniel, knocked softly on the door. "Ready?" Arya looked up, her pencil smudged with blue. "Almost." "Today's important," he said. "We're not just remembering what happened, we're showing what we learned." She smiled. "Benny says the sky forgave us already." Daniel nodded. "Then let's make sure we deserve it." At Meridian Air headquarters, The lobby had been transformed. No velvet ropes, no marble podiums. Just a long digital wall filled with messages from passengers and employees, real stories from across the world. A flight attendant held my hand while I cried. I offered my seat to a father and his son. It felt right. I work at check-in. Now I greet everyone by name. Each story flickered in soft gold text, looping endlessly, a living archive of what quiet reform looked like. In the center stood a single sculpture, a pair of open hands carved from aluminum, holding a folded boarding pass. The pass read, "Seat, dignity. Class, human." People paused in front of it, some crying softly, others taking photos. The moment didn't need speeches, it needed witnesses. Later that morning, the boardroom, now permanently circular, filled again. Cara Solis, dressed in her updated uniform, stood beside a projection of global statistics. Bias incident rate down 91%, she said. Passenger trust index up 67%, but the real change is harder to measure. She clicked again. The screen showed photos, not graphs, of small moments. A flight attendant kneeling to comfort a frightened child. A captain helping an elderly woman store her cane. A crew sharing a meal with passengers stranded overnight. That, Cara said, voice thickening, is the new standard. Across from her, Mai Lin nodded, adding softly, "We turned outrage into education. That's the rarest transformation of all." Daniel smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it doesn't fade when the noise does. By afternoon, the press had gathered at Narita International for the flight of reflection. A single journey retracing the route from Tokyo to Seattle. The passengers on board weren't celebrities or executives. They were everyday travelers, teachers, nurses, students, janitors, single parents. At the gate, Cara stood with Arya and Daniel. Cameras flashed, but the energy was calm, reverent. "Flight 728 taught us one thing," Daniel began, addressing the reporters. "That progress isn't loud. It's consistent." He gestured toward the waiting aircraft. Its tail bore the words, "Sky belongs to everyone." "Today's flight isn't about remembering the injustice," he continued. "It's about remembering what we did after." Cara took Arya's hand and led her up the jet bridge. As they stepped inside, the cabin crew greeted them not as guests, but as family. At cruising altitude, the captain's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, this route carried a story that shook the world. Today, it carries a promise that no one will ever lose their seat to prejudice again." The passengers applauded softly. Arya turned to Cara. "Do you still feel bad about what happened?" Cara exhaled. "Every day," she said. "But now it feels like a direction, not a weight." Arya smiled. "That's what Daddy says about turbulence. It feels bad for a while, but then you find your balance." Cara laughed through a tear. "He's right. You're a smart co-pilot." In the final hour of the flight, passengers began writing small notes that the crew passed around. Folded cards labeled "If I were in seat 5C." Some wrote apologies, others gratitude, others simply promises to be better humans. One note read, "To whoever sits in 5C next, may you always feel seen." Another said, "I was once Lydia. Thank you for showing me how to stop being her." Cara collected the cards in a small box wrapped in blue ribbon. When they landed, it would be placed beside the dignity sculpture at headquarters. When Flight 728 touched down in Seattle, the cabin remained silent. No one rushed to stand. No one grabbed their phones. They just sat, breathing the same air, sharing the same ending. The captain's final words were simple. "On behalf of Meridian Air, thank you for flying with us. This isn't just our airline, it's yours." Applause rose, not sharp, but deep and sustained, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. That evening, Daniel stood alone on the observation deck, watching another plane rise into the dusk. Beside him, Cara joined quietly. "You ever think about the day it happened?" she asked. "Every time a plane takes off," he said, "but not with anger anymore." "What with, then?" Responsibility. He looked at her, eyes warm. The thing about justice is, it's not a destination. It's maintenance. Kara nodded slowly. Then I guess we keep flying. Arya's voice echoed behind them. Look, it's our plane! They turned. Flight 7228, now repainted with its full name, the Dignity Line, was lifting into a sky washed in gold and lavender. Daniel smiled. That's the future. And as the engines roared, Kara whispered the words she'd once feared. Welcome aboard. That night, the Meridian Air homepage changed its slogan one last time. From Fly Beyond to Fly Fair. Underneath, in smaller text, it read, For every passenger who was ever told they didn't belong, this seat is yours. Back in Tokyo, Arya finished another drawing. This time, she drew two planes flying side by side. One labeled past, one labeled tomorrow. She looked out the window, smiling softly. See, Benny? She whispered. Now the sky really does belong to everyone. And for the first time in a long time, the world above and the world below felt the same. Clear, vast, and finally, fair.